When it comes to being the most messed up movie of the year, this one is a close second, right behind Midsommar. Joker is directed by Todd Phillips and stars Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck. Arthur Fleck is a mentally ill man that lives in Gotham City. He has the dream of one day becoming a big comedian, but the people in Gotham City don't take him seriously, and eventually they push him over the edge and he just snaps. From the beginning of this movie being announced, I did not know what to expect, and once I saw footage and the first trailers, I was hyped because this looked so different than any superhero stuff we've seen recently. And honestly, I'm just gonna say it, I loved this movie. I think they nailed it. The performances were great. The story was great, and this movie just has a lot to say. So let's get into it. First things first, what worked? I have to give props to Joaquin Phoenix. Like, he destroyed this role. I always knew he was a good actor, but like, he was just insane in this movie. He brought everything that I think the character needed. And what's great about it is this is not a Joker that is necessarily comic accurate, but it's the Joker in spirit, in essence. They really just nailed who the Joker is and the little things that make him this creepy, twisted man that we know that's eventually gonna go after Batman or go up against Batman, right? And Arthur Fleck specifically is what would be like if a person, an average person living in the world we live in, is just pushed over the edge and becomes someone like the Joker or becomes the Joker himself. And you just see his slow descent into madness, how the world is beating him down constantly and it just keeps pushing him further and further. And Joaquin Phoenix brought that energy perfectly. There are also some great supporting performances here. We have Robert De Niro as Murray, a TV show host that you see in the trailer, who plays a big role in the movie, and Zazie Beetz as Arthur's neighbor, who also just brought something I was not expecting to this movie. Both of their performance really helped complement Joaquin Phoenix in his role as the Joker. Their characters, their relationship with Arthur Fleck, I think really just made this whole thing work together because both of them, again, play really big roles in this movie aside from the Joker himself. And so it's just so good. This movie is also so brutal. The thing is, there's controversy about the depiction of violence in this movie, and I think it may in some ways be a little overblown because there are some super violent scenes in this movie, like extremely violent, but there are also not that many of them. And they're used very actually sparingly. I think a lot of this movie is more about the psychological things going on, about creating unsettling imagery. And so it's not the focus. Like, the crazy violence is not the focus. And you don't really see a lot of it until like the second or third act. So I think it's a lot, but it's also sometimes, in this case, this kind of violence, I think, is just to really emphasize the message that this movie is trying to send. It's like really trying to like get you to pay attention, like see this is what's happening, right? So you may argue, yeah, violence is not necessarily like it doesn't need to show it to that level, but I think in this case, it's just a way of showing it like to an extreme level in order to really exaggerate what's going on with Arthur Fleck. And I think the best part of this movie is what it has to say. This movie has so many messages about the world we live in today, and it uses these characters from DC Comics, these larger-than-life characters, to tell stories and to send messages that are still so relevant to the world we live in today. One of those things being how we treat people with mental illness, that sometimes they kind of fly under the radar because either the government doesn't do enough to help them, we the people don't do enough to help them. This movie is kind of like an extreme case of like what happens when someone with mental illnesses goes unchecked, goes unsupported, if no one's there to catch somebody in the fall. You know, like this is like worst case scenario, and if someone just snapped and just went off. And that's what I think was really great about this, because it's just like an exaggerated version of the message, but like it hits so much harder because it's so over the top. Another thing this movie talked about was the economy and class structure, like the rich versus the poor, what it's like for the people at the bottom who feel unsupported, who look up to the people who are rich to help them because they have the resources to do it, and then they don't. Or the rich people use the poor people as an excuse for what they're doing, like, oh, we're gonna do this to help them, or like politicians making promises to people lower down that they're gonna be able to help them, but then they're really just saying that to get votes. You know, like This movie talks about all those kinds of things, and it works so well on top of the mental illness discussion. Like, it just hits so close to home, and it feels so relevant to today. Like, you see the parallels between what's happening in Gotham and then what's happening in, like, the United States, for example. Like, it makes sense. It's still something that's happening today. What could have been better? These things are kind of nitpicks, and again, this could be different from what you may think needs to be better. This is more of an opinion thing, and this is all subjective, obviously. But for me, the only things that could have been a little bit better that really would have made this movie like almost perfection were the pacing in the beginning was a little spotty. Like, sometimes there's something really interesting that happens, and then sometimes it just really slows down. But once certain things happen, it really does pick up, and I'm really intrigued. So that part wasn't that bad. And then Brian Tyree Henry, you see him in the trailer, but that scene you see him in the trailer, that's all he gets. I wish they had done more with him, given him a character that had more of a role in this movie. He kind of is just there, but again, the movie is so solid, like, I could look past it, but of course he's a great actor, so I'm sure he'll get more roles like this, but it is what it is. Joker is the comic movie that I didn't know that I needed. This is something really unique because it's not necessarily based on a specific story or comic book. It's not based on any shows or anything. Like, this is like they took the Joker and then just dropped him in a realistic situation. It's still Gotham, but it's a very realistic scenario where it's just a man who breaks, who just has a psychotic break that just loses it, right? And so you just see characters that we're kind of familiar with, but in this new context, in this new way that I think works so well. It also draws comparisons to the world we live in, makes us look at what we're doing as a society. What are we doing wrong? What are ways that we can improve? What are things that we're neglecting? Who are people we're neglecting? And I think that's really great to have in 2019, movies that really spark discussions like this. And also having it come from a comic book movie is even better, because there's always times people are saying, oh, comic book movies aren't great. Oh, they're not legit. But I mean, there's this. The verdict. I think Joker is solid. This movie gave me everything I wanted from when I first saw the trailers. This was a great deep dive into a character that's so iconic, but giving it to us in a way that we aren't familiar with. This movie offers amazing performances, great storytelling, and again, it opens up discussion for the world that we live in today. So this is definitely one you do not want to miss. Definitely check this one out in theaters, and if you miss any theaters, check it out on Blu-ray. There's a lot more I want to say about this movie, but I will save that for the spoiler review soon to come. Have you seen Joker? What did you think? Let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe. I will see you in the next one. And don't forget, get Cherry Berry to 100.